My name is Stephanie. I'm a part of the Beyond Barnard team. We put on these kinds of focus series events to put alums in front of students who are interested in their career industry so they can ask them questions and learn all about how to do what they do. And I will ask Marie to introduce herself and Barnard grad year, grad school grad year, of course, where you're at, your current title. And then I'd love kind of a little bit of a sort of a bio history. Students read about it in the invitation, but
Yeah,
what positions kind of brought you to where you are today?
sure. Well, thank you for having me, and hello to everyone. I see Audrey, Grace, Anika, and Naz. So it is wonderful to be sitting here with you. I graduated in 2002. I was a French and poli-sci major. Fun fact, I thought I was going to be going into medicine, and then I was like maybe engineering and medicine. And then in one of my French classes, one of my professors her name is Marie Coichy, and I just fell in love with her work. Like it was one of those times where I'm reading the book of the person who's teaching, and it was just amazing. And so I had a lot of sort of like soul searching to say, what am I going to do? Can I go this way? Can I not go that way? And I had some really wonderful mentors, my advisors who said, this is your chance to explore. This is your chance to figure out what you didn't know was out there. So that's how I became, I kind of switched from the medical engineering track to what is very liberal arts. But I will say that it was one of the best preparations for how I have approached my career since then. So having that flexibility of mind, reaching out to mentors to say, well, can I try this? Is this too much off track for me? It was a really good preparation for that.
That's great. And I think that speaks to some of the questions we talked about before, which are you can be in an industry that is science related and not be a scientist, right, or trained in
Right.
this field. So why don't you tell us your current title, where you work, and a little bit more about your day to day? What do you do? What kind of tasks do you face? What's your team like? That sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I am currently Director of Internal Communications for the CDC Foundation. The CDC is probably the most well-known part of the name, but we are an independent nonprofit that was set up by Congress to work with CDC. So CDC's projects, when you think about the work that they do, oftentimes they're working with public health agencies and they may not be able to move as quickly as a standalone organization can. So we raise money. We're kind of tasked with doing some of the things, fill in the gaps, so to speak. I have been with the foundation for 6 years now, and my role has changed. I joined during the pandemic. So you can imagine that was a really dynamic time to be joining an organization that actually grew while I was there because did emergency responses and they did surge hiring. We went from about 200 to about 3,000 in like a year. And so you can imagine all of the things that come with that rapid growth, and then also just being in it, being in working with first responders, frontline public health individuals. Um, so it kind of came to me not because I was going to work for the CDC Foundation. When I left school, nope, that wasn't true. When I actually left school, I kind of was figuring out what did I want to do. And that was I feel like I didn't take a gap year before I went to college, but I feel like I took a kind of a gap year in that I was trying different things. I worked in fundraising for the University of Chicago, which was really great it was, fundraising is sales and communication. So that was really great preparation for me. And then in that time, believe it or not, I was doing some volunteering with schools and after school programs and working to get grants for them. And one of the organizations that came on my radar who did this as advocacy and such was an organization called the After School Alliance. And I ended up joining them for several years. And I did advocacy. This was really an opportunity for me to do things that I didn't think I was going to be doing, meaning that I was working with ASB nonprofits all around the nation, taking them to Capitol Hill. So doing a lot of training, communications training, actually, training them on how to tell their story, and how to tell their story to different audiences, be it funders, be it um, legislators. So that, and then I kind of was focusing more on working with businesses. So this is the time of like social enterprise where businesses were really much about, how can we use our power for good, and how can we make it part of our business goals? And that kind of got a little fire under me. So I ended up saying, if I'm working in this space, and I had been probably about 2 or 3 years, I want to see how the other side is using it, how they allocate, what are the metrics that they're using to make these business decisions to say, we're going to, we're going to invest in this community because this community is our customer base, because this community, it's kind of like a virtuous kind of circle. So I ended up going to UNC Chapel Hill for my business school degree, and I went in for marketing and sustainability. And that was, there's really no one way, no one route to do this. So I explored a lot of different avenues of, and I landed working with a nonprofit here. Um, and their focus, they're called Points of Light here in Atlanta, and their focus is volunteer and advocacy, and again, a lot of working with private and public partners. So that was where I was leading their internal comms, and but really also looking at it from the internal and external. So this is one of the first times that I'm more focused on this internal audience. So it's been really great to kind of see both sides, where I'm working marketing, advocacy, um, uh, you name it. It kind of
Mm,
I've played that role, so I kind of see myself a little bit as a generalist, but it's just being
mm,
flexible and open to the opportunity to say, if I haven't tried this before,
mm.
what can I lose? Let me try it.
Absolutely. Could you actually delineate that for us a little bit further? What is internal communications versus external communications? I mean, we can make assumptions, but tell us what it
Yeah.
means, from your
So
perspective.
So internal communications is in some, it depends on the place that you're at, but I would say what is going to be one way to think of it is your audience. Your audience is your internal stakeholders. So those are your employees, your board of directors, your leadership. So really all of those folks who are working internally. And all of the things that you do externally, which is, messaging, strategy on how to move, the needle on change communications, all of those things happen internally as well. And so in the space that I'm in, I have an audience of about 700 employees all around the country that we are messaging to, and and I would say that I have internal clients, so the different departments. So you're messaging at, I like to say you're messaging at various levels, at the level of all employees, then you have department employees, and then your teams. So one of the things I always say when I talk about my role, it's one of the major pillars or things that we think about is how do our employees rate our communications? Do they feel connected? Do they feel informed? Do they feel like do they feel like there's a community that is there to support them? So when you think about all those things that tie into the bigger business goals of attracting employees, retaining employees, um, and really all of those, business goals about efficiency and is is the knowledge that needs to flow from up down? Do people feel connected and know what the strategy is? That is all internal communications.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what it's like to be in conversation with like public health agencies, working at a foundation, right, that's attached to a place like the CDC, right? And you said you're doing work that is, of course, separate from the CDC. But what kind of external partners do you work with, and what's that like?
Yeah. So, good question. So one of the things, the when you think about public health, first of all, I think a lot before I went into this sector. I was a communicator, I was a marketer, but I wasn't very familiar with the sector. So I was bringing a set of skills and I still had to learn about the subject matter. So all around the country, every state has a Department of Health. And they are, and in those departments, you have all sorts of public health individuals that are working, epidemiologists, data collectors, all of those folks. And oftentimes, the they may not have the ability to have those people in-house. So one of the things that we do at the foundation is we will hire those individuals, and then we will then embed them with these departments of health. And it creates a bit of a challenge because sometimes when you hire someone who's working with the Arizona Department of Health, they've probably never been to Atlanta, where the CDC Foundation is. And their day-to-day is the Arizona Department of Health. Their colleagues are the Arizona Department of Health people. And so one of the things that I have to do and to do well is to make sure that we build a culture that still is able to bring them in, find ways and touch points to make sure that they feel included and are part of the CDC Foundation. So that's one of the things that we have to do really well when you think of working with a workforce like that. I mean, it's not unique to us, but that's one of the unique challenges that we do have when we think about internal communications and how do we build culture.
What are some of those touch points? Like, what does a day to day look like for you? I can imagine tasks on your desk, such as writing, and certainly managing people, right, or
Yeah.
managing projects. But what?
Lots of writing, absolutely lots
Mhm.
of writing. You, if you, this is something I didn't know when I was younger. You ever watch or hear a CEO speaking at a town hall and they're giving a wonderful speech? The CEO, you may not know, is giving about at least 10 or 15 speeches that week. They do not have the capacity to be doing those speeches. And so one of the things that I do, for example, is I'm a speechwriter for our CEO for all things that comes internal, and for our leaders. So that means that having the subject matter expertise to know and to have their voice, and to be able to, to do this in partnership with them. So that's one thing. Secondly, you have to all of the departments that we have, from fundraising to internal operations to our programs department, they all have communication needs that are some that are similar and some that are not. And so they will come to me to be a consultant to them. And I kind of, in a way, I partner with them as like they're my internal clients. So as they're thinking of strategy of campaigns um, that they want or need to bring to their team members. Part of what I do is I'm essentially, I say, like I'm almost like a gatekeeper, because I want to make sure that there's consistency across, quality assurance across, so that if you're working in programs, you're not having one voice, and then when you move to another department, you're like, oh, this is how we talk about the organization. So all of that is really, really important to ensure that we're really all speaking the same language.
I could probably guess, but what are some things you really like about your job? And then conversely, what are some challenges? But let's start with the things you really like.
I mean, I love storytelling. That is something that is, I'm passionate about, and providing, team members, with an opportunity to share their stories. And it means They're sharing information with each other. They're sharing, and one of the things that I like to say is, um, we are very data focused. We're a science, focused organization, but everything starts with a story and showing impact and showing and demonstrating what we do and being able to make it um, accessible is so important. That's important for an external audience, but you'd be surprised how someone who's working in one team doesn't know what her colleague is doing in another team. And if you don't find opportunities for those connections to happen, so for example, I do our quarterly all staff meetings, and part of that is to bring team members together to share information, stories from stories from the field, innovations that they're creating. So really, it's like making sure that we're not working in silos. We're constantly sharing information.
Mm. Yeah, very much a connector. What about some challenges? It could be on a small day-to-day level or sort of
Yeah,
umbrella
I
level.
mean, there's never enough time for everything. We had, I think I mentioned that we were a small organization that really scaled up really quickly for the pandemic. And then we kind of scaled back, not going back to as small as we were, but not from our height of several thousand. And one of the things that is a challenge for us is how to kind of wrangle all of the different ways that people could communicate into and building a community. We did not have an intranet when I joined the organization. So we call it managing via email. So anything that you're getting, it's going to be, here's an email, here's the newsletter, it goes to the email. And it's not great. It's not a great way to do that. And so one of the things that I'm really um, proud of is bringing this whole platform and creating an internet for the organization. And if you've become used to working in a matrix organization, you start realizing that the simplest things have to go through so many steps. And part of my job as a leader is getting alignment and buy-in, really saying, here's why this makes sense. Here's why this is going to be productive for you. Here's the return on investment, and and really to kind of be persistent and bringing it through. So it took about a year and a half, almost 2 years, to bring this platform on. And now we have the platform, and now you got to pivot because now it's about getting engagement, getting adoption. And so that is, so I will say, part of my job, maybe one day of this week is talking with the team and saying, and asking, why do we have 30% of our team members who are not using this platform, so they're not getting this information from their team leaders when they need to, and figuring out things like, okay, well, what are some incentives that we can provide? I'm talking like, do we need to get a gift card so that people can create their profiles and get online? Um, it's almost like you're thinking like a retailer. What do we build it, how do we get them to come to it? So it's really no one um day is alike, but there are some cadences that we have to maintain. When you think about somebody who's doing external communications and it's like, oh, we have a think of social media, you have an editorial calendar and you have a specific type of content that you're pushing. We also do that as well so that people know come to expect, oh, there's a weekly newsletter. Here's the type of information I'm going to get. Oh, there's uh, a missive that comes from our CEO. This is the type of information I'm going to get. I'm going to expect it every Monday at this time. There's an all staff meeting and it's going to come on the dot every 3 months. And all of that means that you start building expectations and you start building trust and credibility that people know that the information is going to flow to them.
Yes, reliability and trust, absolutely. Uh, Talk to us now a little bit about, as someone who was trained in the humanities, right? And of course, you pursued your MBA, and now you're in an environment that cares a lot about science, not something that you received academic training in. I imagine there's data scientists and policy
Mhm.
analysts, right? Like folks
Mhm.
with all different titles. What's it like managing that? Do you like being in a really heterogeneous environment like that? How is that for someone like you who's a storyteller?
I am someone I'm nosy. So I'm constantly wanting to know, how does this work? And I don't take for granted that we have these amazing experts who have wonderful stories that they want to tell. And they will tell it in a way that oftentimes not someone who doesn't work in that field or in that particular subject matter will understand. So part of what I have to do is to really help them distill it. We talk about simple language, speaking in simple language, not to dumb down something, but how do you make it, I always say, like, so that your grandmother understands what this is, why it's important, and what's different about this particular thing. And that's a skill. And that's a skill that you build and are continually building.
I would be so happy to open things up for questions. Before then, let's talk a little bit about sort of preparedness, recommendations, mentorship.
Mhm.
Did you have kind of mentors as you were figuring your way through this particular field, through this industry? Or how do you recommend students find mentorship in these pathways?
For sure. I am a huge believer in mentoring. I've gotten it and I'm all about paying it forward. So you have questions, reach out, whether you're on LinkedIn or you just go, I don't know, if it's an alumni directory. For the most, I will say it is rare that somebody's going to say, no, I don't have time to talk to you. What I have learned is there is a way to reach out to be effective in your outreach. And that means you, you reach out and be clear about what it is that you want, why you're reaching out, what questions you might have. Because that then helps the person, whether they're busy, whether they're wherever they are, they then say, oh, how can I tailor what I need to tell them? Or how can I find the information that they need? Um, and and I always say that for mentors, um, you have different mentors for different things. I have mentors for where I am as, as a in my career, and where I am at my level. And I have mentors who are younger than me, mentors who are you know, showing me or showing examples of how they're communicating in new ways, they're using tools. So to me, it's like I'm a, I say democratize the whole process, open yourself to learning, period.
What about some recommendations for students who want to try to figure out what a path in communications looks like? What kind of internship should they look for? What kind of people should they reach out to aside from yourself? Any recommendations on that front?
I actually did not have internal communication. I didn't have communication internships when I was an undergrad, but I have had interns, and I'm so impressed by these students when they are reaching out. And oftentimes they will. One of the things that often will stand out to me is what they have done, what skills they have built, whether it's um, working or with on campus, be it a campus newspaper or campus magazine, or showing me how they are developing those skills. Because when you come to me, I'm here to also be able to provide you with knowledge and with exposure. But I don't want you to feel like, oh, I don't have anything to offer. Absolutely. I'm looking at what are some of the initiatives that you've taken. And it doesn't need to be I'm the editor of my newspaper. It can be I do a newsletter for my, professor for, a specific thing. And here's how I was able to put this one story together. It really comes to how are you building your skill set? And then I don't expect you to know everything, but that initiative is really impactful for me.
I love hearing that because we at Beyond Barnard we talk a lot to students about professionalization and how so much of that is happening outside of just something that is officially an internship or officially a job. It can
Mm,
come by way of the way you participate in student clubs or with faculty and research projects. It's a skill developed in a lot of places for sure.
absolutely.
Are there any questions? I would really love for the students for y'all to jump in and ask Marie. This is your chance. You have direct access to her.
Hi, I had a question. So I know that you mentioned in the beginning that you joined your organization during the height of the pandemic. I was wondering kind of how like your communications landscape and your role in the communications landscape has changed like since you joined and up to now as well.
Yeah, that's a really great question. The I have never, you know, been in a pandemic before. Um, but being in it, one of the things that a good amount of my job was managing the speed of information. You're going to get a lot of information to share with your team members, and you need to make sure you're balancing the credibility of that. Um, with tone, meaning that people want to be in the know, but at the same time, your leaders will say, we don't know. We don't know what we're going to do tomorrow. We don't know if we're working from home, if we're going to be remote. We don't know if we're shutting the office down. We don't know. And those are the moments where you need to be able to have built a good foundation of balancing, giving people enough information in a way that is credible, in a way that builds trust. So during the pandemic, we were managing things like um, we were hiring a ton of individuals. So that means that all the time we're getting new people coming into the organization who are not familiar with the organization. So then one of the things that we had to do was to make sure that we were creating the systems that made things so that even if you were a new employee versus somebody who's been there for 20 years, you knew where to go, you knew what to do, you knew who to talk to. You were hearing the same information that somebody who's been here for 15 years from your CEO or from your team leaders. And there's a lot of, there is also a lot of how do you bring your heart into it? That was a time where it was really important for our leaders, especially, to speak not in kind of like a distant, clinical way. There's a time for that, but to be able to acknowledge the fear, to acknowledge the real human emotions, the real things that, you're not just, you're not just at work, you are living in this. And so a lot of what I did, for example, was not just a news, we had communications that showed, team members how, building community, like, we can get, hey guys, jump on a webinar with me or jump on Zoom with me. And we're just gonna share, we're just gonna take tea, or we're just gonna we're just gonna, because we're not able to walk around the office anymore to build community or build connection. It's really understanding that different you have to hit all the different notes when it comes to that. One day you're going to be sending out here's the latest in health and mortality data that the CDC has aged. If you remember the map and all those things. I mean, those are real, you know, real people and real hard things happening. And if you are not able to communicate that, to acknowledge it, and still keep doing the work, it erodes your credibility. So oftentimes that's one of the things that I often had to say and work with my leaders, which is we can't just throw facts. We have to make sure we're also meeting people where they're at and acknowledging their hearts and their spirits.
Thank you so much.
Mhm. Great question.
Everyone's got some experience, right? We all lived through the pandemic, but in particular, in a communications role, in particular at the CDC Foundation, you've just got such a unique
Hmm.
experience. Not a lot of people can match that. Any other questions?
I'm curious what majors are on the call today.
Mm,
I'm an econ major and I'm doing the science and public policy minor here at Barnard, so that's why I was really
mm,
interested to hear from you.
yeah. Other
Cool.
majors?
I'm a neuroscience major.
Excellent, excellent.
I'm in I'm an econ math major.
Awesome.
Economy.
And
Yeah.
I love hearing that because in business school, one of the things that I was exposed to was communications in various sectors, be it the financial sector, and even within the financial sector, different fields and expertise. And there's going to be a there's going to be a commonality around some of the skills, but one of the things that differentiates where you go, especially as you build your career, is thinking, well, do I want to do it in the sciences? Do I want to be a communicator in the medical field? All of those, I mean, require that speciality, but at the very core of it, there is a foundation of a set of skills that that as communicators we need to build. Um,
Mm,
so I don't know if I don't know if there is a um student organization for communications as there is for marketing. I joined those organizations particularly when I was
mm,
MB school. So, and I know there are some that are also at the undergrad level, but those are all really great because those are opportunities to kind of be exposed to, communications, but in various fields of interest.
mm. Other questions? Other majors?
I'm a political science and human rights major.
Hmm.
And I'm curious about like communication specifically. I mean, I know that it can always be difficult in a political sense. I've done some political communication, and I'm curious like what your thoughts are about bouncing subjects and industries. Because you mentioned that you had to learn a little bit from scratch. You had the skills, but how do you go about sort of applying your skills to a new industry?
Yeah, great question. So I look at it I look at it as an exchange. I always say like what can I bring to to this role, and then what do I need to what's the what's the learning curve? What's the gap that I need to fill? You kind of when you join a new organization, often feel like it's like you're drinking from a fire hose. There's so much coming at you. There's so much coming at you. Um, and part of what you have to do is you have to kind of start filtering out what is essential and what is something you're going to learn over time. Um, Marie now knows way more about, you know, uh, uh, maternal health and tobacco and tuberculosis way more than I did when I was, when I first started. Um, but what I can say is I knew that I needed to kind of have a lane, and then I needed to know who my clients were, because you always have a client, whether or not you're actually working in an agency or whatnot, you have a client, and understand like how could I serve them, and then through that is how I'm learning. So I learned I read a lot. I read a lot. I started following various media channels that helped me understand what the current events were. I always say if you're following um, the same channels that your CEO is, you're on a pretty good track. You want to be able to, just to have a starting place. And the great thing is the information is out there. Don't put the pressure on yourself to say, I need to know everything about, so for example, if you were going into, um, I don't know, if you were going into financial financial banking, to be like, I know everything, no, it's okay not to, but it's a good place to start where you're reading The Economist, and it's a good place to start on other industry focus outlets that can help you start soaking up some of the information. But the first thing is, are you a good writer? Do you have attention to detail? Can you really tell a story and do it in a clear, concise manner? those are skills that you're going to bring from wherever and to wherever you're going to go.
I'm curious about what some of the media outlets are that you do follow.
Mm. Um, so because a lot of our work is focused on public health, I follow the MMRs that come out of the CDC. So this is where these are the when you go, when you're in your physician's office and they'll say, the flu vaccine, we really need to get the flu vaccine because this is what's happening around the nation. Um, I follow most of the media outlets because and I'll look at, especially like right now, for example, one of the biggest things that we're following is the measles epidemic. And we're working with various states in that. So I will essentially, I have my little Yahoo or Google news alerts that will feed me the information. I will read New York Times, I will read Washington Post, I will read the Wall Street Journal, um, because all of this is about knowing what's topical, and then you can go deep, I'm not saying that I go into the medical journals. That that's when I'll reach out to my colleagues and say, what's the abstract on this I can get, um, so that I'm clear. But I really it comes down to having a hunger for information and knowing that information is happening in such a high speed, so quickly, that you want to keep up.
Yes. Other questions from the students? I'd be curious if there's any strictly humanities majors on the call. It seems like a lot of social science and STEM informed.
Yeah, I'm actually a film and media studies major.
Love it.
So definitely very, very humanities focused, but I am actually like pursuing more communications heavy internships, at least for this summer. So this has been really informative and really interesting.
Great, I'm so happy.
Anyone else? Anything else you want to share, Marie? I know we're finishing a bit early, but it's just you and me, so we have the time.
No, it's been a pleasure talking with everyone, and like I said, please feel free anytime, to reach out if you have questions, or if you're, I always say this to, my mentees, go through my LinkedIn and see if there's anybody that's like, that's interesting, or this organization interesting. Reach out and say, hey Marie, can you tell me a little bit more? It's here for me to share. So let me know.
I love that. One of my favorite recommendations for students is find someone whose profile interests you and ask them about some job they had in the past or internship they
Mhm.
had in the past. It's that is a free resume available to you, right? And it's such a
Yep.
wealth of information. And then the expert is right there that you can ask. Great.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So reach out anytime. It'd be my pleasure.
You heard it from her. Well, thanks for joining us. It sounds like this was helpful and
Yeah.
useful, and I do hope that it was. Um, Marie, it was so nice. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Folks, you're welcome to leave. Please enjoy this absolutely stunning evening we're having in New York. Marie, I hope the same is true for you. And
Thank you. Thank you for having me.